Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Good Gut Live. As implied in the name, we are live. The benefit to watching Good Gut Live is that you can interact with us in the chat down below. So if you're on Kick, if you're on Twitch, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Instagram,
What's Kick?
what are all these things? So wherever you're watching, you can comment down below. You can interact. Today's topic is a good one. And on that note, if you're watching this later, thank you so much. You can watch this anywhere you find podcasts. And so today's topic, we're talking about how to choose the best diet. So this is wrapping up season 1 of Good Gut Live. Really, Good Gut Live came about because one of our patients was like, hey, you do these lives. We have Good Gut members in our private practice. Hey, you do these lives, and we threw them on YouTube. Can you put it on like Spotify and Apple so I can listen to like a podcast? We're like, sure. So that's how Good Gut Live came about this year in 2024. If you're listening to this part of our podcast, it's the end of the year. We're approaching a new year. So we thought talking about diets, because there's so many out there. This was a request by one of our awesome, amazing patients who was like, hey, can you speak on this topic? We take in your request. We have a whole list and we'll eventually get to the request. So we're really excited to talk about this because the topic of diets, dieting, eating is just, I mean, now more, I never could have imagined when I first started in college in this
Bright-eyed,
career,
bushy-tailed,
just how complex things would get and just how
and
confusing.
intense, really. Like, people get heated on this subject. And
Oh
I
man.
get it. There's a certain ethical aspect to eating. And some are very
Many
much more
aspects, yeah.
passionate about, various aspects, whether it's, you know, animal rights or environmental. But, oh
Mhm.
man, I just thought like, oh, it's fun to have
Food.
It's fun to have people eat fruits and vegetables. That'll be fun.
It's so easy. Everyone just
Mhm.
will follow, the same plan. It's
And
gonna
then
be great.
we decided, like, as if just nutrition wasn't complex enough, let's help those with the most severe gut issues
Mhm.
figure out how to still eat and tolerate those plants that we're so passionate about helping people eat. But we wouldn't have it any other way. That's why we do these lives. That's why we have these
Yeah.
discussions and answer questions, because there's a lot of information, there's a lot of misconception, there's
Yeah.
a lot of contradicting correct information as well. So that's always something we like to remind you all
Mhm.
of like, there are many diets because there are many people and there are many conditions and phases and stages of life. Like, there's no one size fits all.
Right.
The one thing that we know is one size fits all is eat plants. Eat
Ooh,
eat a
you're
high
jumping
percentage
ahead.
of
We're gonna get
plants.
to that. Well, I want to give an overview. So what we're gonna do is just approach this logically. We
Mm,
want to keep it very simple. We're gonna get into eating plants and
mm.
why do that. We're gonna get into when it's a little more complex, when you're having gut issues. So we're gonna get into all of that as well as then answer some of the main questions we had. Some of the main questions we had from our patients that were submitted was macro counting, carnivore diet, paleo fasting, and eating for your blood type. Eating for your blood type always comes up. That like never goes away. That's been around for so long. There's still
Mhm.
so much on it. So that's kind of a quick overview of what you can expect in this episode. We're gonna get into that.
Mm.
And I love Dahlia. I mean, yes. I mean, you guys know if you've been following us, if you follow us at Married to Health, or if you listen to the podcast, we are very much plant-based. We love plants. And that's not to say we're gonna demonize you if you don't love plants, or we're gonna hate on you, or we're dogmatic about it. We believe in truly helping our patients wherever they are, truly connecting with our community wherever they are. We just love plants because we read a lot of research and we understand that plants are truly key to having an amazing gut microbiome. Really, our ancestors have all thrived on plants, whether you're Egyptian like Dahlia or you're Mexican like me. You can trace plants back to a huge part of our diets, for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. So plants have
Unless you're
been
like an
around.
Alaskan Inuit and plants are not a
Which,
strong part of your diet,
correct,
but they're still part.
which will get into this idea of eating for longevity, eating for
Mhm.
strength, eating for just optimized cellular health. So there's different reasons why you eat, which segues into really the basics, right? Which is understanding you have to eat. So first and foremost, you need to eat, right? And then it's asking, why do we eat? Well, our body and why we eat is to sustain our life. And really going a little bit deeper into that is we're sustaining also microbes. So we're technically a super organism. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. We use that term before, but you're an organism which sustains other organisms. So without maybe realizing it, you have a even bigger responsibility than just sustaining your own life. You're sustaining trillions of lives within you when you're talking about bacteria and archaea and all these microorganisms that live inside of you. So you need to eat, right? I think we can all agree on that. So great. We're starting off great. We all agree we need to eat. We're not getting to the fringes of the people who just are, what do they call them? Air breathers, or there's that thing where they think you can breathe your nutrients in.
Interesting.
It gets wild out there, guys, as you probably know. So we all agree we can eat. If we can all agree things have changed where we are eating for survival, nowadays in 2024 and beyond, we eat because we're sad. We eat because we're bored. We eat because maybe we're addicted to food. Maybe
Or we eat to thrive and optimize our tip-top health as well. Like you have those
going.
biohackers and, of course, all of us want to thrive. But yeah, you have people who are like, I need this many percentages and that's great if someone can sustain that. But yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So we eat almost like for optimize, actually you can say we eat professionally, right? Whether that is in a healthy way, like you're this elite athlete, or now there's like professional eaters that you see on TikTok and Instagram. So really interesting now, all the reasons why we eat, which can lead us down into some crazy paths when we're talking about health. So in that context, I would say Dahlia and I are approaching it really, and over the many years of being dietitians, we are eating. I would summarize why I eat as to really sustain the most important ecosystem on the planet, which is our inner ecosystem. So I eat to have a healthy microbiome, which I believe scientifically, professionally, as well as personally, promotes the health of not just me, but my family and my surrounding, even just far reaching out to the rest of the world. So that's why how would you agree, or would you summarize why you eat differently?
I would say very much along the same lines.
Yeah.
And I eat for hormonal health.
Yeah.
I'm a woman in my late 30s, and I'm in that time of hormonal shift. So now that's a conscious way that I'm starting to eat. Whereas before I kind of could get away with less thoughtful
Some
ways
more
of
chocolate.
eating. Yes. But yeah, I would say, yeah, for the health of my microbes, which I know supports the health of my brain and my mental health. And yes, definitely for the health of our planet is something that's really important to me. And also because I get hangry.
I mean, you just want to eat, and food is delicious, right? So I would say step one is understanding why you eat. So let that be tip number one, really, is saying, why are you eating, right? Being conscious of that. And to take it a step further, we are putting the phrase out there, regenerative nutrition. So I think we can kind of encompass what we're saying of why we're eating in this term of regenerative nutrition, which is saying the food we eat not just helps us, but it helps the environment, helps those around us. So it's taking that conscious level and extending it and taking it to a new level of going into that regenerative nutrition. So not just helps the people growing your food, but the soil it was grown in and you, et cetera, right? And then even leading into the next generation. So if you're pregnant, list goes on and on. So really, really cool.
But like I said, like I have hormones in mind. I know myself as somebody who has an autoimmune condition. So many of my patients I work with, also just eating to be mindful of your immune response can be really important. So I know that's really who our audience is. And we have some questions coming in who are eating for what's called medical nutrition therapy.
Yes.
So eating with
Dives deeper.
getting that, food is medicine in mind, because whether, you can maintain that philosophy, we do know medical nutrition therapy can be extremely effective for a wide variety of different conditions, whether that is diabetes and other endocrine and metabolic conditions, whether that is high cholesterol, high blood pressure, whether that is SIBO, IBS, histamine intolerance, mast cell activation, Hashimoto's, so many specific conditions, heart failure, have specific ways of eating that have been associated with their best outcomes. And sometimes these things contradict, right? Sometimes somebody really maybe ethically or environmentally wants to eat in a specific way, but for their specific health, that might not be completely in line with what their medical nutrition therapy needs are.
Yeah, and as we dive deeper into this, so it sounds like what you're saying, Dahlia, is you can almost eat food can get you in a almost a not so good position. But the good news is you can use food to get you out of that not so good position, right? So kind of you can think of it as like the standard American diet, for example, can get you into then needing medical nutrition therapy to then hopefully get you out of that, right? So if you don't know us by now, we take an integrative approach where we're not, if you have diabetes or if you have Crohn's disease or SIBO, whatever condition you have, we aren't the dietitians or part of the medical team that's saying let's just keep you there and stabilize you, right? Let's just help your symptoms while you live with this condition forever. We are saying let's get to the root, right? Let's understand what happened. Let's, to the best of our ability, combining as many modalities as possible, help you and lift you out of that maybe hole that you maybe got yourself into. There's cases where also your mom and grandma play a part in that, right? There's transgenerational
Genetics.
effects that kind of dig you into that hole. So we help you understand that as well. So very important with that context. But yes, using medical nutrition therapy that is not one size fits all. Spoiler alert. And it can be very unique. It usually is very unique to you, and it can get complex into that medical nutrition therapy. So on that,
I think also
go ahead.
more people nowadays are mindful of medical nutrition therapy, because those of us who grew up in the 80s, 90s,
even early 2000s
even
now.
early 2000s, right? I say, like, we were raised on antibiotics, food, dye, and plastic. Like,
and sugar, don't forget the fourth
plenty
food
of sugar,
group.
right? So that was processed food came to be, ultra highly processed food came to be in those couple generations. And so that is why we're seeing extremely rapidly rising rates of cancers, different types of cancers, pancreatic cancer, colon cancer. We're seeing much more metabolic disease than we were seeing a few generations back. So those in our generations, and even, prior generations to us, are really needing to be mindful of that medical nutrition therapy. So it's, how do I eat for my heart and my mind, right? Whether I have an ethical standpoint in mind, but then how do I eat for my gut and my endocrine system? And yes, in that way to heal some of these things that maybe I incurred.
So that's a great tip number 2. Assessing and being aware, does your body need medical nutrition therapy? Are you a woman who's perimenopausal, or maybe you're skipping your period, or again, not that you're skipping it, but your body's just like, hey, I'm not doing this. I'm overwhelmed, right? Are you a male who's experiencing gout or heart disease? Or so it's assessing, do I need medical nutrition therapy? This is where then my diet will be different from definitely the standard American diet, or assessing, is the standard American diet what got me here than needing medical nutrition therapy? So that is great. Tip number 2 is really assessing where you are and finding those. Part of what we do is really helping people make that assessment and going, oh, is it testing? Is it just kind of awareness of, hey, these labs aren't normal? Hey, what you're
Mhm.
feeling of one bowel movement every 4 days isn't normal, and where that's kind of leading you and going, oh, that's going to change your diet, right? For sure. And really assessing if your healthcare team, maybe you are realizing something's off and you're working with a team that's going, diet doesn't matter, assessing that and going, yes, it does.
Red
Diet
flag.
does matter, right? Red flag. So big
Because,
point.
yeah, you can have these different conditions and elect, right? It's your prerogative, it's your life, it's your health. You can say, like, no, I just want to take some meds for it. And
Yeah.
I'm not demonizing medication. I take medication every single day. So I want to clarify that, right? I take thyroid medication. I do need
Mhm.
medical nutrition therapy again, because the way that I grew up caused or contributed to some of these different things. I'm not demonizing medication. I'm not saying don't take medication. I take medication myself. But if I were only taking medication and
Mhm.
not mindful of my lifestyle, my diet, my sleep, my stress, my movement, I kind of liken that to having a water leak, a known water leak.
Mm.
But you're kind of just saying, don't don't stop the leak and don't get to the root of the leak so you can turn it off or patch the broken pipe. Just like patch it up and put some wallpaper on top of it, so you won't see the leak anymore, or the symptoms of the leak are controlled, right? The actual water, but eventually that patch might burst, or you're growing mold behind that wallpaper that you slapped on top of it. So
Mm.
it's so important to combine these different things. It's
Mhm.
so important to bring in providers to your team. Yes, to
Mm.
say, let's, you know, yes, stop the source and the symptoms of the leak, right? We don't want it to leak out everywhere and then you have mold everywhere. Absolutely. If you
Mhm.
need providers to help you acutely, you want to combine that also with that root cause investigation and that medical nutrition therapy, that lifestyle change. So that way
Mm.
we're just healing all parts. We're addressing all parts rather. So, so important.
Yes. And kind of in that, while we're on this topic, we have a good kind of question coming through.
We had a couple.
Yeah, and another. So I like when they're very pertinent. Let's go ahead and bring them in. What do you consider medical nutrition therapy? Is low FODMAP an example, or are you
Mhm.
referring to something more specific? So I'll give you the exact definition. So medical nutrition
Mm.
therapy is a treatment that uses nutrition to help manage or treat health conditions. So if
Mhm.
you have a health condition, and then you're going to go, okay, I'm going to use this, let's say, food, but typically it's a protocol. Typically it's a very science backed protocol, especially if you're working or if you're in the hospital working with a dietitian. um, yeah, then you're using food to then help with that condition. A low FODMAP diet is definitely MNT, medical nutrition
Mhm.
therapy,
Because
right?
it's using nutrition to help manage or treat a disease. IBS is now
Hmm.
considered a disease. For a long time, it was considered a disorder. But
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. You are using this altered way, this evidence based altered way of eating in order to help alleviate symptoms or even put that disease or disorder
Hmm.
into remission. So, absolutely, a low FODMAP diet is. Somebody is asking about
Mm.
low histamine.
Ooh.
So this person saying this topic is so overwhelming as I am struggling with a possible diagnosis of MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. I have been told to try and follow low histamine.
Ooh.
So low histamine is indicated in more and more research as medical nutrition therapy for histamine intolerance, mast cell activation, even in some cases, dysautonomia, disorder of the autonomic nervous system. So, yes, both of those are considered to be medical nutrition therapy. Now, what gets interesting is some medical nutrition therapy can be used as more of a lifestyle. Some of it is used temporarily. I would
Right.
say the data showing a low FODMAP diet in its entirety is supposed to be used acutely, a short period of
Hmm.
time, 6 to 8 weeks at most. And then you're trying to reintroduce things. You could be on kind of a light FODMAP diet if you need to be, although now we know we have tools to help you break down the FODMAPs once you identify which FODMAPs you don't do well with. So that's a short term medical nutrition therapy.
Mhm.
If someone does have a chronic condition like mast cell activation syndrome, or even, let's say, PCOS that somebody's really struggling to manage, you might need to stay on a low histamine way of eating for mast cell activation. You might need to stay on an altered carbohydrate diet for PCOS. So you really want to kind of understand that. Like, is this a chronic, long-term condition that I'm going to be dealing with? Or is this something I can put into remission?
Mhm.
Type 2 diabetes, we know you can put into remission.
Yep.
IBS, you can put into remission. Even some autoimmune conditions, you can put into remission. So
Mhm.
that's when you use that medical nutrition therapy, that MNT, to get to that remission point. And
Now,
then once you're there,
well, now we're diving a little, and now we're going deeper down the rabbit hole. Point 3, which is not all MNT is created equal or the same,
mm,
or another way to say it, or is useful,
mm,
right? Because technically, and this is kind of getting into some of the questions we got, and we'll kind of go here, but I like to kind of, we'll recap these points for you at the end. But it's this idea: is the carnivore diet MNT?
mm,
What would you say?
I'm gonna say no. Well,
Well, by
hold
definition,
on.
I would say yes.
I would say the keto diet is more
Right. Yeah.
MNT.
Technically.
Carnivore is more extreme than keto. So I'm gonna
Right.
say carnivore no, keto yes.
Okay. I mean, I technically agree, but by definition, many are using the carnivore diet to help with a condition, with a disease state. So
Okay.
technically, they, whether you agree or not,
It's not evidence
it's
based.
not evidence based, but from their perspective, they're going, yes, this is my MNT. So interesting, right? And I would argue that there are many very passionate about, let's say, and again, I'm not trying to rag on the carnivore diet. I mean, it's just, we'll get into it, but there's many who are very passionate about the carnivore diet out there, and who would argue it is MNT. It's helped me with my acne and my gut issues, and the list goes on and on of these success stories you'll hear. And for those that aren't watching or just listening, I'm doing air quotes with my with my fingers of success stories, and we'll get into that. But essentially, our stance on the carnivore diet is it's very short term. It is not a sustainable long term diet, but we'll get into that.
Because really, the only data you're finding on it are case reports. So usually that's like one person that
Right.
we've reported on, or self-reported data. So that's more anecdotal. Like, okay, I'm going to ask this group of 10 people on a
I'm
carnivore
gonna ask my
diet.
Facebook carnivore group to
Yeah.
take a survey or something, right? Essentially. I
So there's
mean,
that we really don't have data, and because there's so much data in favor of plants, which are completely omitted on a carnivore diet, it's hard. You'd be hard pressed to find good, solid, actual data on something like that. I will say a ketogenic diet, which you can and should still include plants on,
mhm.
it has been implicated to be used, especially in certain neurological conditions.
Yeah,
But you, again, if when you're properly planning a ketogenic diet, you should be eating plants. You can do a plant-based keto diet as well.
yeah,
But again, who is that appropriate for?
yes. Okay. So I know. So this can get very complex, but in everything we're mentioning, so if you are getting further down into the rabbit hole of complexity with your diet, I would say it's very important you're working with a care team that understands the complexity,
Mhm.
that understands your goals. I was just talking to a patient very recently where she is working with a functional team, a functional medicine provider. And I asked them, like, has the functional provider addressed why you got to where you are? Are they interested in addressing why you got to where you are? Are they explaining the why and even the how of how you got to where you are? And it was like, oh no, not really. They're just giving me this protocol, these supplements, and that. Okay, so kind of a red flag there, right? You want your care team to address the root so that way you're not back to where you started, or great, you're feeling good for 3 months and then you relapse back to where it all began, right? Because you never addressed where it all began. So that is very, very important. And the point I'm making in this is yes, you can be a keto, you can do vegan keto, and you can do a low FODMAP diet in more of a paleo way, and you could do it more plant-based. But the point I'm making is you may be all needing different nutritional therapies, but I would say the fourth point, which is very important, is plants can be a part of that. And we would
Mm.
recommend, and I would highly, I mean, this is just based on every kind of level of evidence from anecdotal, which is saying in our personal lives, plants have been amazing, plus in just unbiased, like this isn't studies funded by Beyond Burger or, whatever, this isn't
PETA.
PETA funded studies where plants across the board repeatedly, from reviews to meta analyses to randomized controlled trials, again, to anecdotes from people. So, yes, the carnivore, people have the anecdotes, but they don't have all these other aspects where plants repeatedly and logically are there to help us, right? Despite what many, many say out there. And with that, plants are so in line from even just if you guys have been following us for a while, we use a lot of analogies. We use garden and plant analogies that go very well with the gut. And that's because they are different sides of the same coin. The gut is made, and really our gut was designed to keep us in contact with nature, being soil and plant and really just nature as a whole, and they reflect one another within one another. So it's this beautiful synergistic reflective relationship. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't down below. But would you agree with that, Dahlia? Like, or what are you?
Yeah,
Dahlia's kind of taking it all in, like,
I
okay.
am taking it all in. But yeah, no, there's irrefutable data to show.
Right.
Yes, from any standpoint, plants are conducive to best health
And
and longevity. So again, something might work in the interim acutely with restricting plants, but for longevity and not just quantity, but quality, it
yeah.
should include plants.
And the reason being, and really with the microbiome data that has come out, it's really was the missing link of allowing plants to really take center stage and really give us this deep understanding where we're now going like, yeah, well, oh, these things called prebiotics are really good. Most prebiotics are plants, right? These
Mhm.
things called probiotics are really good. Most probiotics we're getting come from plants, right? um, and so really we're looking at, okay, what do these really beneficial microbes like to eat? Oh, it's fiber and carbohydrates coming from plants. Oh, these fermented foods. Most of the fermented foods are in plant form, especially historically and generally that most people are eating. So yes, there are dairy and other ways too. You can technically ferment like meat and things like that, but if you're speaking on the majority and really the totality of evidence, it is plants, right? So again, the list can go on, and we have done a formal presentation on this, but really just speaking from our own experience as well as just the data, just over a decade of data that we've looked at, and then the protocols we've implemented, where that is why we created one of the only 100% plant-based protocols for IBS, SIBO, right? So irritable bowel syndrome, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and the various kinds of overgrowth you can have. And typically, what's mainstream out there is saying, oh, you have overgrowth or you're having gut issues, add more animal products and move away from plant products. And yes, in the short term, we agree that will make you think you're feeling better, or that will give you the illusion you're feeling better, but you are escaping and running away from the main root, the main problem there, right? You're not addressing the actual root cause. You are focused on the symptoms and going, I just want to get rid of these symptoms, without saying, I want to help use these symptoms to then help me understand why this happened and where this root is to all of this, right? So that is very important. And yes, and that's where you can get in the weeds, where the person commenting before on Instagram was talking about histamines, and yeah, it can get into the weeds of histamines and sulfur and FODMAPs, all these things, right? And that's okay.
Gluten.
There's ways, there's dietitians like Dahlia and Rachel and myself and many others who have really studied this and understand this and can help you with this. And I think as time goes on, this will become more mainstream of just understanding how food is affecting us. And really what we're trying to do is bring back the microbes that can help us properly digest. We've been destroying our microbiome, especially in the last 100 years, through industrialized food. And so we're in a place where we've lost so many species that children being born today do not have the same species of children being born even 100 years ago, right? So it's a very interesting time that we're seeing. And so the question is, how do we bring back those species? How do we ensure this inner ecosystem is healthy and teeming with life? And really, the simple answer is a diet in which you're eating plants, you're tolerating plants. Majority of what you're eating is plants, right? So with that, I want to get into some of the nitty gritty and the questions, right? So do we macro count while eating plants then, or are we macro counting, or um, yeah, so that was one of the questions
Mm.
of counting your macros. So for those that aren't familiar, macronutrients, so the term macros refers to macronutrients. We have macronutrients, we have micronutrients. So macronutrients are fats, carbohydrates, right? Protein. And so micronutrients would be like really, I mean, getting into the micro would be talking about histamines and all that, but micronutrients are vitamins, minerals, antioxidants now would kind of fall into that. And
Mm.
do we count all those?
It depends. It depends where you are.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're on an acute or short lived medical nutrition therapy, it's overwhelming if you're trying to do both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're working out and you're training for a marathon and you don't have a specific medical nutrition therapy you need to be on, macro count. You can combine the two. It gets really tricky and you need to really devote a lot of time to it. It's not impossible. It's just a lot more intentional. So
Hmm.
just be realistic of where you are with your time to
Hmm.
prep and shop and calculate and weigh and log, because yes, that's almost like saying I want to normalize and optimize at the same time. Because if you're
Mm.
on a medical nutrition therapy, it's usually to normalize things because there's something that's abnormal that you are changing your diet for. So then when you're also trying to train like an athlete, you're also trying to optimize because that's also another stressor on your body. So sometimes it's hard to do the both. So I
Hmm.
usually say pick which one you need to at that point in your life, which one is more important for you.
And really, if you are struggling with symptoms, I would suggest it is the medical nutrition therapy side. So
Agreed.
before you're counting macros, and if you're having symptoms, you got to find the right medical nutrition therapy, dig yourself out of that hole,
Yeah.
and then you can
Because really, I mean, especially
count
with the
macros.
gut, you could put in the right macros, but if you can't absorb them, you're not necessarily
Right.
retaining the benefit of those macro and micronutrients. You're so carefully calculating and logging. It's about what you can absorb, digest, and absorb, not just what you can eat.
Right.
So you want to keep that in mind as well. If you can't even eat them, let alone digest and absorb them, focus on the MNT.
Right. Good. Uh, Going back to carnivore, another question was carnivore diet. So our thoughts on that, and just how we feel about carnivore diet. So I'll first be positive, where I think a lot of what, and we'll lump these because the other one's paleo, so carnivore and paleo.
No, I wouldn't lump them together.
Well, I want to lump them positively, where I think what both of them are saying is that we need to get away from ultra processed food, these artificial colors. And this is, and we talked about this on our last live, and there's a lot going on with that. We were talking about Food Babe and Kellogg's, and we were petitioning, and it's like, why are we allowing these questionable and even deleterious ingredients in our food? I agree with a lot of that, right? Like we're eating too much added sugar, we're eating all these hyper processed foods. Yes, so paleo and carnivore, even plant-based diet, specifically whole food plant-based diet, is saying do away with that, right? get these ultra processed foods and ingredients out of your diet. I agree with that. That's great. Where then we split is, especially carnivore, is just saying they really get into the camp of saying plants are actually bad for you. So plants kind of fall into that category of something that's bad for you, whether they're
Carnivore more than paleo.
carnivore. Yeah,
Not
this
paleo.
is, yeah, I said specifically carnivore, where they're talking about oxalates. So these anti-nutrients come in, lectins and all that. They're bad for you. I mean, we've talked about this so many times at nauseum, where these things are not bad for you. They're actually food for your microbes, and they can be beneficial for you. If you have severe dysbiosis, they are not going to feel good. You know, you eating a kale salad is likely going to make you feel terrible, because you have the dysbiosis. It's not the kale salad, right? So that's where we kind of split with carnivore. Also, when you're talking about environmentally, carnivore is just not sustainable environmentally. That's where you can get into ethics and all these other reasons. But strictly talking about diet, nutrition, medical nutrition therapy, carnivore is not optimal for so many reasons. Just, I think, first and foremost, the mucosal layer of your gut is made of carbohydrates. The mucosal layer of your gut is key. And when you don't have carbohydrates, there's been studies to show when you're not eating enough carbohydrates, the microbes in your gut start to eat that mucosal barrier. When you're eating too much saturated fat, you start to get leakiness in that mucosal barrier. And so a lot of these things start to happen. Great, your bloating went away. Yeah, the epithelial barrier. Great, your bloating went away. Maybe your eczema went away, but a year, 2 years, 3 years, I've yet to see someone on the carnivore diet for 10 plus years go, I'm so healthy and feeling optimal, right? It's just not.
And we
the case.
know that the bugs in the gut who are repairing things, they're making things called postbiotics or short chain fatty acids. They require carbohydrates in order to make those things. And
Right.
so when you are starving them of carbohydrates, you're essentially starving them off. And then they're not able to do that reparative work. So we all have also seen short chain fatty acid deficiencies in
Mhm.
a carnivore diet. And some might argue you can use butyrate, which you can acquire from animal products, or butyrate can be in animal products. We don't know that we're directly absorbing that, and there's no data to really show that that is true. So I'm going to say thumbs down on a carnivore diet, really.
Thumbs down. Next is paleo. So you were differentiating paleo and carnivore, which I do agree with. They're not the same. So paleo diet is basically saying eat like you did, or like our ancestors did in the Paleolithic era. And so typically you're excluding dairy, legumes, whole grains, salt. Definitely, I mean,
Sure.
without question, hyper processed, right? Artificial colors and dyes and all that, like we explained. Yeah, refined sugar and refined fats like oils. And basically, if you didn't like, there's no industrialization whatsoever. I don't think there's even like wood tools to like press olives like we did even 2,000 years ago. This is way back, and this is really just eating whole foods, including whole animal foods. Now, this is, I mean, it depends on ratios, right? I think there's some who go, I'm paleo, and they're eating pounds and pounds of animal foods with some fruits and vegetables. And then there's some who are eating more of the fruits and vegetables with some animal foods, right? So this can lean kind of two ways, where you're going more towards the Mediterranean type diet, but even then, kind of. And then there's kind of a paleo leaning more towards like a carnivore, right? So that does matter. Definitely, where we lean, we'd have you lean more towards the plants, more towards a Mediterranean, where it's like 80% plants. And if you feel like, okay, you're doing some animal products, okay. But ideally you are leaning towards more of the fruits and vegetables. And then I would add, and you can let me know about this, but I would add the legumes. Like legumes and whole grains are amazing.
Because you also aren't eating any tofu or tempeh, even if you're plant-based paleo.
Right.
You're really relying on seeds as your protein sources. And yes, nowadays we have things like pumfu, and you can get pumpkin seed or sunflower seed protein powder, hemp protein powder. Again, it just speaks to that sustainability of it. It's possible, just like plant-based keto is possible. If you're mindful, because you aren't eating whole grains either, if you're mindful to get in enough starch elsewhere from things like starchy vegetables,
Yeah.
potatoes and peas and things like that, which gray area because they're in the legume category,
Yeah.
you maybe could, again, feed those short chain fatty acid producers enough. But it's very intentional if you're going to do it in the appropriate way. So I would say if done very mindfully and appropriately, I would give it a thumbs up.
Give it like a sideways thumb.
Yeah, again, because most people aren't. Yeah.
Because most people aren't.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, it's important to understand that you need these plans, and really like it's understanding that it goes back to the original point we made in this live. So one of the points is, why are you eating, right? If you're eating, so like if you think eating like a Paleolithic ancestor is going to then do something, you have to be honest with what that is, because I don't think the Paleolithic era was an era of longevity and optimization, right? It was an area of survival. It was an era of, I need to just eat and survive because I'm going to get eaten by a tiger or a wolf or whatever, right? So it's understanding. I don't think any of us would like to go back to that time. It's going, I think we have to embrace, we try to embrace, or let me say this, we try to really just really appreciate the modern times while embracing the wisdom of tradition and ancient times, right? So it's understanding that yes, there was great things that happened in the past. We can bring that to a modern time where we can optimize and live longer and be healthier and not really worry about getting eaten by something, right? So we can kind of blend the both together. It doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
And fun fact I want to share, I actually was invited to participate for 2024's US News and World Report's Best Diets. And it was a long survey that we took. And they were having us rate really so many diets. I think there were about a dozen different diets. And it was interesting. But yeah, there were specific diets, like whether it was a carnivore diet, which was included, to a fruitarian diet. So like completely opposite ends of the spectrum and everything in between, including like a Pritikin diet or an Ornish diet or just a plant-based diet, a paleo diet. So that was really cool to even learn about. I had never heard of some of these different diets. Like some of it were like Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers. So some of that are just like a hyper processed type of diet. But, taking all these things into consideration is so, so, so important, of who it's appropriate for, the feasibility, the implementability, the longevity of the diet. So many factors to consider. So if you're confused, the best advice that I could give is work with an unbiased practitioner.
Just say it. Work with us, guys. Go to marriedhealth.com. No, I'm just kidding.
We try to be unbiased. We have people say like, hey, I see on your website you're plant-based. Do I have to be plant-based to work with you? No. But we are going to encourage you to eat plants. I'm never going to encourage anybody to only go plant-based, right? I think that's not for me to ethically decide that for somebody else. But I will encourage you to eat and tolerate and digest more plants, for sure.
That's clear.
Yeah. So, yeah. Kind of cool to consider all these different facets.
And hopefully by the time, if you're listening or watching on the podcast, we'll link it down below if it's out. Do you know when it's going to be out, that article? I'm guessing by the end of the year.
I think it comes out early 2025.
Oh, early 2025. Okay, so stay tuned for that. We'll share that on our email list. But get on our email list, go to marriedhealth.com, click on our newsletter, get on our email list so we share all the cool talks, articles, and things we're a part of. So we will share that with you, getting more into diets. So last couple questions on fasting. Fasting, I would say, yes, fasting is great. I think a lot of people overlook the fact that we can fast every day. It's called sleep. And we can not eat, let's say at 8 o'clock p.m. before we go to bed. Whether you go to bed at 9, 10, or 11, we can stop eating and then we can start eating at 8 a.m. the next day. And that is a nice
Or
12-hour
you can,
fast.
yeah,
Or you can go a little
lengthen
bit
that
longer.
either side.
So fasting, I think a lot of people think I have to do this 5, 10, 15, even 20. I mean, it goes even further. Water fast or like no food at all. Doesn't have to be that extreme. That can be a medical nutrition therapy or therapeutic treatment. It doesn't have to be that extreme. We can do it every day, but there is daily fasting that is time restricted feeding, and that is wonderful. Big fans of that. We practice that. Anything more than that, consult someone who's extremely knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And go back to that point number one, why are you doing it?
And I was listening to an interesting podcast, I will say, on times of eating if you're training.
Mhm.
And it really depends on male versus female and stage of your fertility, right? So it's
Mhm.
different if you're in your fertile years versus if you're perimenopausal versus if you're menopausal. So depending on where you fall in that spectrum, you could do great with time restricted eating and doing a fasted workout that's really intense as a male,
Mhm.
and then breaking your fast a few hours after that versus a menopausal woman or a
Yeah.
I will say postmenopausal because you're only menopausal one day of your
Mhm.
life. But if you're a postmenopausal woman who's exercising in the morning, like your eating window is going to vary. So, yeah.
Right.
But we do know no matter what your eating window is, you just shouldn't be snacking and grazing all day long. That's really not recommended for many people. Again, it's conditional unless you have like gastroparesis or you're pregnant. You shouldn't be just grazing all day.
We have a good question coming in Instagram, but I want to finish up just lastly with eating for blood type. Very interesting. What I'll say to summarize this, very because this could be a whole podcast episode. Maybe let us know in the comments if you want us to do.
I don't want to.
We'll have to bring someone on, but to dive deep into it. But essentially, looking at the unbiased research, the blood type proteins. I mean, from the unbiased research, yeah. I mean, we keep a very open mind. We're integrative or functional. We like to look at really out there studies, but really there's really no association with what you're eating. I would say focusing more on your microbiome. We know your microbiome will change, will optimize, and so it's really, yeah, there's systematic reviews of unbiased just really supporting that, it doesn't really have the evidence, right?
Yeah.
And so, and even I remember we talked about this before, we went kind of in depth before, it was a while back though. But I was looking at the book itself and even the references. So there was a mismatching of references, like
Mm.
what they're saying and then what they're linking to the reference was like a completely different study. So I don't know if they fixed that by now, but it wasn't looking good in just supporting what they're saying in terms of the blood type diet. So even without all of that, I would say before you start to follow a blood type diet, follow a microbiome type diet, right? Which is saying follow the diet that's going to help your gut microbiome, okay, first and
Mhm.
foremost, then move on to the blood type diet if that, if you want to do that. But I guarantee if you're following a microbiome based diet, you're going to eat plants. If you can't tolerate plants, you can definitely retrain and strengthen your gut microbiome to tolerate plants and to thrive on plants, okay? That is most definitely in the research. That is most definitely is what we see in our patient population. It's what we've experienced personally. The list goes on and on, right? That is something you should most definitely do. um Seen some questions come in. You want to answer
Mhm.
those? And then,
Yeah.
okay. Recommendations for MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, um, and plant-based eater, also currently pregnant. Ooh,
Mm.
that's a good one. Lots of MCAS questions. That's really
Yeah.
good.
And, we're learning more about it. So people are going to be asking more about
Very
it, which is so
curious.
important. So you might, especially depending on what you're pregnant with, because we do know estrogen is a histamine liberator. And if you're pregnant with a daughter versus a son, a female versus male, you're going to have more estrogen in your system. So that
Mm,
actually could exacerbate your MCAS symptoms a little bit more than a male pregnancy. Um, And, what we do know is you want to try to reduce your histamine intake just so that you're not overwhelming your histamine load, your histamine tolerance, your histamine bucket, because your mast cells, when you have mast cell activation syndrome, you're already overproducing histamine. So you want to try to manage other histamines coming in. You don't want to completely cut off histamine or completely break down histamine, because histamine is actually important for hormone production. So you don't want to be taking things like excessive amounts of DAO in your pregnancy. It's not safe, but you might use antihistamines if you are okay to do that with your care team, or you might ask your care team of whether it is a prescription strength or over-the-counter mast cell stabilizer. You can certainly eat things that are mast cell stabilizing, like perilla, or you can have tulsi or holy basil, or vitamin C is mast cell stabilizing. You want to optimize your iron levels, which can often be low in pregnancy. So there's a lot you can do in a pregnancy if you do have MCAS. Certainly want to ensure that you are eating to support your microbiome, because that is where you're naturally producing your DAO, especially in the lining of your small intestine. And if you have some gut issues going on there, you have more histamine coming in with those very active mast cells. So there's so much you can do if you're pregnant and you have been diagnosed with mast cell activation. It might be a little bit more specific to you, but that's a good place to start.
Wonderful. So,
And then we had another question.
another? Only menopausal for one day in your life? Whoa, never heard that before. Love that.
Yeah. So technically, menopause is, you hit menopause when you haven't had a period for 12 consecutive months. You're either perimenopausal leading up to that, and then that day that you hit that 12-month mark, you're in menopause that day. And then after that, you're postmenopausal. So you've moved past it. You haven't had your period for a year. Yes. Then you're postmenopausal after that. So yeah, technically you're only menopausal for one day ever in your life.
She said, "Thank you, gorgeous souls." Oh, you're welcome.
Thank
gorgeous
you.
soul. Wonderful. So I think that was a lot of great information. You maybe thought we're going to rank the top diets, or
Stay tuned for the article.
but stay tuned for the article. We can do that, but we like to provide context, guys. I think that's our niche, where we just provide this context where there's not a one size fits all, but there's definitely a direction in which you can go, and that is loving your gut, that is eating plants, and then tailoring that to your needs. Whether, again, to recap, understanding why you're eating, right? Tip number 1, why are you eating? Are you an athlete? Are you 4 years old? Are you 40 years old? Understanding what your needs are, right? Understanding, do you need MNT? Being in tune with your body, in other
Medical
words.
nutrition therapy.
Right. Are you needing to regain that healthy level that you once were, or maybe you've never been, and starting from that ground level and then working your way up? Understanding that not all MNT is the same, right? There's many out there promoting something as helping with your disease, but is it really? And how do you, hopefully we've given you some insight into understanding that. And then, yes, we would agree, we would easily defend and promote choosing, again, your gut health and plants. And those are really synonymous. That is helping your inner ecosystem. That is loving on your gut microbiome. That is the essence of who we are and what we do. Heal with each meal. It comes from eating a healthy plant-based meal so that it does shape your gut microbiome in a healthier direction. That does get into all these scientific nerdy words, nutrigenomics and proteomics and all these things, where literally you can shape your DNA with what you're eating. So it's beautiful. So have a great Friday. Remember, Good Gut Live is live every Friday. The benefit of joining a Good Gut Live is you get to ask the questions that you're seeing here come through. You get to participate live. You can send us cool comments. We're seeing some cool gifts come through and all this stuff. So wonderful. Thank you for that support. Thank you for that interaction. And if you're listening to this later, we hope that you would leave us a review on Good Gut Live, whether you're watching on Spotify, Apple, drop us a comment. Let us know what topics you want to hear from. Again, we're two integrative registered dietitians with over a decade of experience of really practicing integrative and functional medical nutrition therapy. Our goal is to help you, your family, and really the world heal with each meal. So until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know I said the heal with each meal, and you can say,
don't forget to feel with each meal as well.
Each meal.
Yes.
Yes.